Greetings! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Garrett Roche. This is a continuation of the last videos you saw where I introduced Mr. Johannes Froebel-Parker of the book Anastasia Again, The Hidden Secret of the Romanovs. And today we were going to continue with having the Catskill artist, Ms. Barbara Green, who painted this stunning painting behind us of Evegenia Smetisko, aka Anastasia Romanov, if we can prove by locating the DNA sample that was said to be left by Ms. Smetisko. But Ms. Green painted this picture behind us. It would be Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanov had she lived, which she possibly may have, to age 40. But unfortunately, Ms. Green is enduring a family emergency at the moment, so we have Mr. Parker once again in her stead, and Ms. Victoria Signorelli right here to continue on. Mr. Parker and Ms. Signorelli.
And
please share your thoughts on Ms. Green.
Victoria has some information about the gallery.
Yes, Mr. Froebel-Parker, he's created the gallery as an outgrowth of an original collaboration on the part of himself and Maria de las Nieves Gonzalez Sanchez de Concepciones Montejano Duarte of Madrid. In 1990, the Froebel-Parker and Gonzalez took the reins and began Grupo Arte Madrid, Albany. Its first curated show was held in Nelson Rockefeller Plaza of the New York State, Albany, New York.
It was a wonderful exhibit also. A very good exhibit. And Garrett, would you like to say a few words about Barbara Green?
Absolutely. Ms. Green is actually a graduate of the same class with well-renowned Ms. Barbara Streisand. And Barbara Kerr Green, her full name, was born in Brooklyn, New York, and graduated, as mentioned, in the same class from Erasmus High School as another well-known personage in the arts, Barbara Streisand. Her undergraduate training was at New York University, followed by 2 years at the Instituto Allende in San Juan de Allende, Mexico. There she studied printmaking, stone lithography, and etchings. She completed her MFA at Allende, known for her expertise in figure work. She gained invaluable experience with Harvey Dinnerstein at the National Academy of Design, New York, and the Art Student League, New York. Perhaps her most unique live figure experiences were in the boxing gym run by Cus D'Amato in Catskill, New York, where the young Mike Tyson honed his skills.
Yes.
So Ms. Green, as we understand, has quite a background under her belt. And there's some further information to share with everyone here. Another aspect of her background is her extensive fascination with and dedication to Jewish history,
Yes.
and in particular Sephardic Jewish history during the expulsion from Spain. She said, as quoted by Ms. Green, "I stood terrified, has been shown by the Froebel Gallery at the Truro Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, and at the Joseph Gallery of Hebrew University in New York." Green, commenting on this series, said, "When I began work on the series, I did a lot of research. I focused mainly on the 14th through the 16th centuries. They kept meticulous records during the Inquisition, and in reading about the period, I became interested in people's stories. So I decided to commemorate certain people by using them as subjects for some of the paintings. I had no idea what they actually looked like, so I had friends pose for me. I chose those who I imagined looked right or who felt right to me based on what I knew about the victims. Barbara Kerr Green's boxing works have been shown on television in the series Heroes, hosted by Joe Namath, in photo montages televised during some of Tyson's championship fights. So,
She has quite a resume.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Fascinating individual with such a broad spectrum of knowledge and talent. Thank you, Vicki. And subjects she has pursued.
Another one of her exhibits that we did at the Froebel Gallery and Grupo Arte, Madrid, Albany, was dedicated to the victims of the Holocaust. She used the German title Der Zirkus beginnt, which means the circus begins, looking at the events of the Holocaust as sort of a kind of circus in a negative way, orchestrated by the Nazis and the nomenclatura of the Nazi party, and showing the victims as sort of the, not the animals, but the victims, yes, I guess we could say the victims of this horrific three-ring circus. And I'm very, very proud, when we did the exhibit, we welcomed Mrs. Matilda Cuomo, the mother of our current governor in New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo. She had a group of students that she was mentoring, and she wanted them to come and speak to Barbara about the Holocaust and view the paintings. And I have to say, it was a very long visit. I would say 2 to 3 hours with Mrs. Matilda Cuomo. And Mrs. Cuomo, if you are listening today, Miss Green sends her greetings, as do I, and we are still very honored by your visit when you came, as when you were First Lady of New York State. We'd like to thank you for that honor when you did come. And that was quite an exhibition. Yes.
And also, speaking of genealogy and such, in case the Cuomo family is listening, I happen to be familiar with Cuomo's Cove Resort in Windham, New York, which is a third cousin to Governor Cuomo.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Actually, a third cousin to, I believe, Governor Cuomo Sr.
Oh, Mario.
Yes, Mario.
Interesting. And as you know, genealogy is very important to this entire research dealing with Anastasia Romanov. Because we do believe, and I do believe as the author of Anastasia, again, that Ms. Smetisko was using a pseudonym, but she was really covering her true identity for many, many reasons, including her own safety, of Anastasia Romanov. And that genealogy has given us DNA samples, we know, through Prince Philip of Great Britain. So we do know what the DNA should be of the family. And when we are able to get the DNA sample, which we have heard is extant, and if it's not, I really believe that it could be available with an exhumation, but I'm hoping that we do not have to get to an exhumation to prove that Ms. Smetisko was not lying when she claimed that she was Anastasia Romanov. And I recently visited Newport, Rhode Island, the Congregational Church of Newport, Rhode Island, which is a beautiful historical structure decorated by Lafarge, the interior decorator Lafarge, where AKA Evegenia Smetisko worshipped in her last days when she was living in Newport. And they assured me that up until the end of her life, she claimed with conviction, not just saying in passing, oh, I'm Anastasia, with conviction, I am Anastasia Romanov. And she claimed that until she died in 1997 in the North Kingstown, Rhode Island nursing home. And she would have lived a very long life, 1901 to 1997, 96 years, when people believed that she had died, and many people still believe that she died, in 1918 in the massacre of the Romanov family. And so genealogy, DNA, all those family connections, very important.
Yes, definitely, and for you too, because of your genetic background, the Froebel Gallery. And John, tell us about the picture in the back, in the front there.
What Victoria is referring to is my mother's family, the Froebels, Froebel in Hochdeutsch. Frederick Froebel, my 5th great-granduncle, was the founder of kindergarten. And I don't know if it shows up in the camera or not, but here below we have some of the Gaben, the gifts that Froebel created to gradually lead children through a pedagogic experience from manipulating shapes, weaving, and many different kinds of activities. They're called die Gaben in German. And when I was in Germany a while ago, the Froebel Gallery, and my mother, so the gallery, me representing the gallery, my mother, also a Froebel, we went and visited Germany, and we were given these in Bad Blankenburg.
Wow, that is a wonderful gift.
It's a wonderful gift, and I've got
Outstanding
it framed
gift.
for posterity's.
Yes, and
Beautiful.
you'll soon have that framed and positioned someplace.
Someplace, yes.
So people could actually come and
Where
see it.
people can come and see that that's correct.
That's wonderful.
And, you know, Barbara Green, when she painted this picture behind us, she studied many photos of the Romanovs, speaking of genealogy, to get a feel for the family. She also looked at photos of, verified photos of Anastasia Romanov as a child, 2-year-old child, 7-year-old child, 14 years old, up until her 16th year, before she supposedly was killed, 17th, and then looked at photos of Evegenia Smetisko, starting in about the 1920s through the 30s, 40s, up until the photos of her in the October 1963 Life magazine, and put all of those into her mind, her artist's perception, to come up with the face of Anastasia as she would have looked in the 40s, 40 to 45, dressed as a Grand Duchess, had the monarchy survived in Russia. So it took a lot of research of looking at family members, and then also looking at Evgenia and Anastasia together.
What an amazing, astute, interesting artist Ms. Green is.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely
Very, very
fascinating for
talented.
someone to follow a layout like that to eventually produce this fine piece. Fine, fine piece. And we have a question, by the way, from Mrs. Catherine Ritchie of Schenectady, New York. She says, do you think that Anastasia's date of birth, 18 June 1901, was intentionally put on the grave of the woman known as Evegenia Smetisko? Thank you, Catherine, for that question. Wow,
And
excellent question.
Catherine, if you are listening at some point to this interview, thank you very much for that question. And for those of you in the audience wondering what she is speaking of, she's referring to the fact that on the grave of Evgenia Smetisko at the Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Monastery and Seminary in Herkimer County, upstate New York, there is a grave. And on that grave, the name Evegenia Smetisko, written in Cyrillic script, is very clear. Of course, Evegenia Smetisko came to America with identity papers and immigration papers with a much different birth date, is 1899. On the grave, in an Orthodox monastery, she is buried with the date of birth of Anastasia Romanov. Now, I've not seen her death certificate. I tried to FOIA it. I was not able to get a copy of Evgenia Smetisko's death certificate, but one assumes that the date of birth would be the date of birth on all of her quote-unquote official documentation. But for some reason, the monastery, or whoever was responsible for the grave at the monastery cemetery, has put the birth date of Grand Duchess Anastasia. This, for a woman for 96 years, claimed that she was Anastasia. So there's a clue and a hint and a mystery in all of that, and thank you, Catherine, for asking that question.
Many thanks, Catherine.
That's a wonderful question.
Excellent question indeed. Very good. And I'd also like to point out, as you and I were discussing, John, that unlike the famous imposter Anna Anderson, who tried to do everything she could to supposedly claim she was Russian, Ms. Evgenia Smetisko did whatever she could to try and protect herself from being identified as such, by including even going by the anglicized version of her name, Eugenia Smith, and converting to the Congregational religion in Rhode Island, as opposed to claiming her Russian Orthodox heritage. So she was doing this to, as I observed, to most likely protect her identity from, if she continued to come out, people would say she was crazy or use it against her.
Or as one descendant of a Romanov told me, you never knew in those days after the revolution, even if you were in Europe in exile, who was going to jump out of the bushes with a poison-tipped umbrella and end it all for you.
Exactly. That's the other part of
And other
protection
Romanovs
overseas as well.
that's true. And other Romanovs themselves actually used pseudonyms, names which were not their baptismal names, in order to avoid detection. So that use of another name is really keeping in tradition of others of the imperial family who were able to escape.
Excellent. That's a superb point, John. Yes. And do you have any further comments on our fine artist who unfortunately could not be present today? Hopefully in the future we'll do an interview with her.
I have to say I love art,
Present.
I collect art, I sell art, and I love to go to museums. And I had the great and unique possibility of visiting Barbara many, many times during the process of painting this painting. So I saw when she began the initial drawing, and then the underpainting, and then the features of the face, and then the details of the dress and the jewelry. And it was an amazing opportunity for me to see Evgenia Anastasia Romanov come off the planimetric canvas to become almost a three-dimensional person. So I have the feeling
Absolutely.
that I'm in the presence of Anastasia, because I do believe that Evgenia is Anastasia, even though many Romanov experts, well known in the community for their wonderful, wonderful books and research they have done, who poo-poo the idea, who say it is impossible, and nothing is impossible, and nothing is absolutely proven yet as of October 23rd, 1918.
2018.
2018, I'm going backwards in time. 2018,
Which is the,
right, we're in the centenary of the Romanov tragedy.
The 100-year anniversary, that's
Yeah.
correct.
And so, you know, nothing truly yet is 100% bona fide complete. And you notice that the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia is also taking its time. They're being very, very cautious on any definitive proclamations about the family. Worthy of respect. They did face death in a Christian manner, so they are passion bearers. There is a theological conundrum because in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, they were made martyrs, made saints in 1981. Of course, Evegenia Smetisko was still alive in 1981. And so this would have been a source, excuse me, I am very sure, of some kind of mixed emotion when she saw images of herself as a saint, knowing that she was still among the living. And those theological conundrums are something that must be taken care of by the religious community. But the research community has to look at it in a different way. And I'm sure at the end everything will be peaceful. And there will be unity and a fuller understanding of what happened. And for those who have a faith, religious faith, I think they'll be bolstered by the miracle that somebody actually could have survived such a tragic crime, massacre of innocent people.
and it has been proven many times that people did survive, you know, miraculous deaths. So it's like they can survive these things. So it's very, 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 very possible that she could have survived.
Most certainly. And also, Ms. Green, along with Mr. Parker here, have joined me on recurring radio broadcasts. I go on with a host named Kieran Riley on WGXC 90.7 FM out of Hudson, New York. And Ms. Green had brought up about how during the Holocaust, if one body was piled on top of another, how the body at the top, the person at the top, if there was just a little leeway there between that person and the, in this case, if you want to say the ceiling or the piece of structure above them, they could possibly have enough air to keep themselves alive and through creativity escape.
Yes, there were, according to Barbara, chronicled cases of people who survived mass executions.
Yes.
This has even greater credibility to me with the Romanov situation because they were in a small room with a door. There were rows of people shooting over the shoulders of the person in front. The guns were giving off smoke. Bullets were not being aimed necessarily. They were being shot haphazardly over the shoulders of the other people participating in the massacre. The walls were horsehair plaster, so there was a lot of plaster dust, and they were drinking.
Oh,
so there were a lot of,
absolutely, that's another factor.
and they took a break. And so, and then came back. So you see, there are many, many instances where possibly somebody could have escaped. Mathematically, there are possibly. It was not really a well planned out, systematic execution. It was rather haphazard, rather spontaneous, and
last-minute rage, perhaps.
Perhaps, yes.
Like this last-minute rage, and therefore it wasn't as well thought out or calculated as some other massacres throughout history.
Yes.
Also, everyone is welcome to go to WGXC.org, and they can type in, to hear Ms. Green speak, they can type in either my name, Garrett Roche, or they can type in under John Parker, And I believe that broadcast was July 17th, if I'm not mistaken. So you can search for that date and click on the headline, which will have our names in the headline for July 17, 2018, and the word audio next to it in parentheses. I believe because we had a broadcast on the 100th anniversary of the Romanov execution, July 17th. So I believe that was the one we had Ms. Green on speaking, and that's where she mentioned about the bodies layered on top of one another. And
Miraculous cases of survival.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
She also mentioned many times, I'm not sure if on that broadcast, but in private, she has mentioned that the idea of Evegenia worshiping in a congregational church should not be anything that would necessarily detract from her claims. I know some people in the Orthodox community, Christian Orthodox community, have expressed doubt that anyone who was Russian Orthodox or Orthodox at all could ever worship in a Protestant place of worship. Except that the conversos, many times, and during the Spanish Inquisition, would keep their Judaism behind a facade of Catholicism. So they would be overtly practicing Catholicism, but in their own way, close to them intimately, in their own minds, in their own enclaves of friends and family, could still practice their Judaism. And I think maybe you're right that, first of all, it was very close to her. She didn't drive. It was 2 blocks away from her foundation in Rhode Island, so she could easily walk there.
Yes.
And it is very, very ornate. It doesn't look like a congregational church. It looks very Byzantine, very highly oriental, decorative. So she would have enjoyed the aesthetic of that and still felt that she was worshiping God, even though there was no Russian Orthodox church that she could easily have gotten to.
And then also, because it's written in your book as well as other novels and other books, saying that the Romanov family constantly, when they were under persecution, when they were being held captive, they held their religious services in a room.
Yeah, even to the point where the sisters created a prayer which they each memorized. Each one had a piece of the prayer which they would say collectively that they had composed amongst themselves. So it seems that they were had to rely on their own individual spirituality as they were gradually cut off from the sacraments and the rituals of the Orthodox Church.
Yes, and many times I had written, I had read that Alexandra was the one who always pushed her children for the religious. She was the one that was always starting the prayers so that she could keep her family together, their religious beliefs alive, and would keep them and their souls alive.
And remember, Alexandra was from a pious German Lutheran family. So all of that initial training, she didn't leave it behind when she became Orthodox. I think it actually informed her orthodoxy because she already came to Orthodoxy with a deep-seated faith in Jesus, in goodness, in the Bible, in prayer. Prayer life is very important in the Lutheran Church. And I think that must have also influenced her motherhood, even though she was now Orthodox with her Orthodox children. Still, she was bringing her own childhood training with her.
And it's written in a lot of those books that I have been reading about Anastasia and the Romanovs, that she went into the marriage with that attitude. She didn't overtly become Orthodox until she understood that she could keep her own values and her own religious beliefs with the Orthodox. So she became actually hybrid.
Yes. Yeah, she adhered to Orthodoxy, but it was informed by her early pious upbringing in Germany as a Lutheran.
Exactly, so she could have pushed that over to her family, and such as, that would be perfect for Evgenia
Yes.
or Anastasia, because she had that background.